Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a highly significant announcement from the FDA dated July 9th, 2026. Now, if you follow the oncology space, you already know that multiple myeloma is an incredibly complex beast to treat. But, advancements in this field aren't always about entirely new drugs. Sometimes they're about revolutionizing how we actually deliver existing, highly effective therapies to the patient. And that is exactly what we're breaking down today: the FDA's approval of a brand new subcutaneous treatment method for a cornerstone multiple myeloma therapy. We're going to dig into the data, the clinical trials, and what this actually means for everyday treatment protocol. Since we've got a lot of dense clinical data to get through, here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the FDA approval itself. Number 2, the 3 specific indications. Number 3, clinical trial efficacy. And 4, safety and dosage. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the FDA approval. So the major headline here is that Sanofi officially got the green light from the FDA for a subcutaneous version of Isatuximab-irfc, which is being marketed as Sarclisa Escena. Now, you might be wondering, why dedicate an entire explainer just to a new delivery method? Well, moving a patient from an intravenous drip, which can literally take hours and keep them chained to a clinic, to a simple subcutaneous injection administered right under the skin is a massive logistical shift. It's a real game changer for the actual day-to-day lived experience of patients battling multiple myeloma. Section 2, 3 specific indications. Okay, so who is this actually for? The FDA has carved out 3 highly specific patient populations for this subcutaneous option, all depending on their prior lines of therapy and specific drug combinations. First up, it's approved alongside pomalidomide and dexamethasone for adults who have had at least 1 prior line of therapy, and that prior therapy must have included lenalidomide and a proteasome inhibitor. Second, it's approved with carfilzomib and dexamethasone specifically for adults with relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma who've had 1 to 3 prior lines. So we're talking about patients whose cancer has unfortunately returned or just stopped responding. And finally, it's approved with bortezomib, lenalidomide, and dexamethasone for newly diagnosed adults who aren't eligible for a stem cell transplant. The FDA was incredibly precise in mapping out exactly how this drug should be utilized. Section 3, clinical trial efficacy. Before we get into the actual trial numbers, let's just make sure we're aligned on the core metric here, ORR, or overall response rate. As you know, ORR is the gold standard metric the FDA looks at, and in these trials, it was the primary efficacy outcome measure assessed by an independent review committee. Put simply, it's the proportion of patients whose tumor is destroyed or significantly shrunk by the drug. It's how we know if this new delivery method actually holds up in the real world. All right, let's look at the Sarclisa trial. This was an open-label, non-inferiority trial, and non-inferiority is the key word there. The whole goal was to prove that this new subcutaneous injection isn't somehow worse than the standard IV drip. They took 531 patients, randomized them 1-to-1. Half got the subcu injection using an on-body delivery system, and half got the traditional IV, both alongside pomalidomide and dexamethasone. The results? The overall response rate for the subcutaneous arm was 71.1%, compared to 70.5% for the intravenous arm. So the data clearly proves the subcu method is just as effective as the IV method. It hit the nail on the head and gave the FDA the exact proof of concept they needed. But honestly, the data doesn't stop there. Let's talk about the phase 2 ISALCO study. This one involved 74 patients dealing with relapsed and/or refractory multiple myeloma. We all know that is a notoriously difficult, stubborn stage of the disease to treat. These folks received the subcu injection combined with carfilzomib and dexamethasone. And the result? A seriously impressive 79.7% overall response rate. Nearly 80% of patients in a really tough-to-treat demographic saw a significant response. That is huge. Building right on top of that, we have the ISOSOCIT Phase 2 trial. This was a single-arm study, also with 74 patients, but this was a different group. These were newly diagnosed patients who were not eligible for a stem cell transplant. They received the drug alongside bortezomib, lenalidomide, and dexamethasone. The efficacy outcome for this group is just staggering, a 97.3% overall response rate. I mean, wow! It's numbers like that that really highlight why having a more convenient delivery system for such a potent combo is absolutely crucial for newly diagnosed patients. Section 4, safety and dosage. Okay, let's pivot to logistics. The FDA's approved recommended dosage for Isatuximab-irfc is exactly 1,400 milligrams. But how is it actually delivered? Well, the approval allows for 2 distinct administration methods. It can be given using the cyclic on-body delivery system, or OBDS, Or it can just be administered with a manual syringe and infusion set. This built-in flexibility is great because it gives healthcare providers the ability to tailor the physical delivery to whatever works best for their clinic's workflow and, most importantly, the patient's comfort. Now, as with any potent oncological treatment, we have to look impartially at the safety profile. The prescribing information comes with some very strict warnings and precautions. We're talking risks of hypersensitivity and other administration reactions. The FDA also specifically warns of neutropenia, that dangerous drop in white blood cells that leaves patients incredibly vulnerable to serious infections. There are also warnings for secondary primary malignancies, meaning the risk of developing a totally new type of cancer down the line. Plus, the drug can cause lab test interference and carries a risk of embryo-fetal toxicity. It is an undeniably powerful medication, and the FDA makes it crystal clear that these high efficacy rates do come with a profile of serious potential adverse events that absolutely must be monitored. To wrap up this explainer, there's one final detail from the FDA's announcement that I think is really worth chewing on. Isatuximab-irfc actually received an orphan drug designation, and the FDA used an expedited review process to push this approval across the finish line. That tells us a whole lot, right? When the FDA fast-tracks something for a serious condition, it's a massive flashing signal that there is a profound unmet need in the patient community. Moving a highly effective treatment from a restrictive IV drip to a 1,400 milligram subQ injection is a monumental leap for patient quality of life. So seeing this expedited approval leaves us with a big question. As medical tech and drug delivery systems continue to advance together, just how rapidly is the multiple myeloma treatment landscape going to evolve over the next few years? It is a fascinating space and one we are definitely going to keep a close eye on. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack all this data today.